Sur le pavé, la plage. The international situationists were one of my earliest influences when I used to sell the International Times on the streets of London in 1969. Afterwards I was influenced by Yoko Ono and the Flaxus movement, but my second really important influence was when I met Roger Ely. In 1976 I was the Vice President of the Students' Union in Brighton Polytechnic, being voted in on an anarchist ticket, and I was organising a sit-in in Brighton College of Education when I was approached by Roger Ely, who suggested that he could entertain the people sitting in, the students sitting in, with some poetry. And I agreed, and he came and performed Mr. and Mrs. Jones to an enthralled and bemused group of people sitting in, and that started the beginning of a long artistic and friendship relationship. By the Christmas of 1977, I was programming punk bands like The Clash, The Damned, The Vibrators, The Stranglers, and Roger proposed that we create a contemporary art festival, which he programmed, which had many of the artists that he had been influenced by and had met in Bradford when he was at Leeds Polytechnic, Bradford Polytechnic. And they were people like Dave Stevens and Rob Conn, but also we programmed in Hinchcliffe, Lowell Coxall, People Show, Hesitate and Demonstrate, Lumi and Son. And in fact, in some ways, it was a sort of a roll call of some of the greatest experimental companies and individuals working in that time. And we worked with Public House Bookshop, and you're going to hear more from them individually. And Dave Stevens can probably tell you more about other elements of the programme. It was being exposed to the kind of artists that Roger was interested in that made me particularly interested in performance and live art, and experimenters and innovators working in art. And seeing how, when we programmed artists into pubs and public space, that we were able to reach an audience that perhaps ordinarily wouldn't be attracted to this kind of work, that I started to realise that there was a possibility of mixing art and entertainment and finding a new audience. And that was confirmed when I worked with a guy called Dave Lavender, who subsequently set up Comedia. And he put on a sort of comic cabaret which celebrated the work of Carl Valentine, a German performer and artist. And that was very much a case of seeing a cabaret format which mixed art and entertainment, and that was partially led me towards thinking about creating the Zap with a cabaret format. But also Ian Smith, who had come to the art school and had been a part of the organisation of contemporary art festivals, he was also organising cabaret style events in a place called the Alhambra on Brighton seafront. So these sort of combination of influences led to the establishment of the Zap in 1982, when it was a peripatetic club that started off in the New Oriental Hotel in Brighton, and then moved to the Alhambra, and then moved to another 2 or 3 venues before we finally settled in the Arches on the seafront. The economy that's kind of supported the Zap in those early days, before we had our own venue, was quite simply that myself and my partner Patricia would risk our income. We were both teachers, on funding the club, and we would hope to sell it out, and if we sold it out, we'd get enough money to do the next week. Initially it was monthly, and then it went weekly, and by the time we moved into the new premises, met Dave Rees, or we met Dave as an old friend, but went into business with Dave Rees and Angie Livingston, we'd established a good reputation for the club, and quite a wide audience who we then took with us to the Arches. The relationship with the art school was actually totally integral to the way the club developed, in the sense that the art school was producing a wide range of experimental performance, and the students who are on that course, such as Ian Smith, Roy Hutchins, and many others, were looking for a place to perform. But also, there was a strong sort of group of comedians like Cliffhanger Theatre. There's people like J.J. Waller. There's a range of entertainers who were working in theatres but also working on the street that we wish to present. And then there's our own interest in music and other art forms. So Brighton at that point was a very, very lively place, producing a lot of artists and a lot of performers and a lot of entertainers, that using this idea of mixing art and entertainment and putting them into cabaret slots, we created the sort of cross-art form art and entertainment programming that was successful at the ZAP, in which the art school provided a crucial ingredient. The one act that for me kind of defined this mixture of art and entertainment at that time was the Wild Wigglers, which was had been created by Liz Agus and Billy Cowie and Ian Smith. Ian was a student, Billy was a music teacher, and Liz was a dance teacher. And to me, it was the most exciting thing on the circuit at that time. And so nothing could have given me more pleasure when at some point, and I think it's about 1982 or 1983, they invited me to join them. So that when we set up the ZAP in its own premises, nearly everybody, including Dave Reeves, who did an extraordinary performance, nearly everybody involved in the ZAP was a performer or an entertainer, even including Roy Bayfield, who was a student from the Art College, who I went to see his degree show, which involved a lot of cleaning fluids, and he was of course overjoyed when I invited him to come and be a cleaner at the ZAP. The mission of the ZAP was always new art for new audiences, so we were always interested in finding ways of attracting new audiences, and we didn't discriminate between art forms. We covered just about every art form in our programming, and the technique we used of putting on art and entertainment in the same evening or on the same occasion sort of continued right the way through the history of the ZAP. We were doing, as house music became more popular, we were creating sort of art raids and events which are still of a type which is still continuing today. I think that if there was an influence from the ZAP in that respect, I think it's because you can still see people wanting the whole experience. I mean, a ZAP night out was an experience, and you didn't go because there was somebody famous on the bill, although you might be attracted by one or other people that you knew of. You went because you knew you were going to have an extraordinary evening, and you'd like some things and you might hate some things, but you'd certainly have a lot to talk about when you recovered the next day. I think the other sort of strong driver in the ZAP was that we were really interested in taking art to where people were, and so from the earliest days when Roger introduced me to artists who were working in public space, in the street and parks, on the beach, in the sea, People Show famously had a boxing match which went out to sea. From that point onwards, there's always been a really strong interest in supporting artists who wanted to work outside conventional venues. And in the case of ZAP Productions and the work particularly that Dave led, that meant getting involved in a lot of street art and creating street festivals. And in my case, continues here. We are in Sri Lanka at the Surumbadura residency, where artists come to live and work for 6 weeks, and the work they create is influenced by the twin themes of the residency, one of which is collaboration. It's inviting artists to collaborate together and to collaborate with the public, which takes us into our second theme, which is to be inspired by the culture and the people in which the residency is located. And so we have become increasingly interested in co-creation and in that type of collaboration between artists and the public, where the public are intrinsic either to imagining the work or actually making the work. So we continue, and we continue onto the beach.